And so thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is such an exciting topic, and it's one that absolutely resonates with everyone. And as exciting as generative AI is in general, and artificial intelligence and machine learning is as well in its various iterations. And I've got a bit of an education from Barbara in terms of what that really means. We want to think about it, especially in the context of this event, from the perspective of its impact on identity services, its impact on security, its impact on risk, the ability to have increased veracity of phishing attacks and so forth. So let me. So it looks like we lost and now recovered Malcolm.
Yes, you did.
So
the echo.
Oh, very good. Yeah, that sounds much better. So yeah, a tremendous array of just world-class experts, in this area, and I'm honored you guys could join us today. Barbara Starr, who is, in my less than humble opinion, one of the top artificial intelligence experts in the world. Did a lot of the led a lot of the DARPA programs that ended up in, what we know and love and think of, as AI today, has done it for 30 plus years. Chris Wolf, who I've had the opportunity to work with, and I did get the spelling and VMware right. I had the opportunity to work with at Burton Group a long time ago. Was our expert and thought leader in virtualization, has spent a long time now at VMware, and was real excited to find out that he now, I think you ran the VMware's AI labs, and now you're responsible for AI and a lot of advanced development things, right, Chris?
Yep, that's right.
And Malcolm Harkins, who was the longtime Chief Information Security Officer before it was even really a big thing, at Intel, and one of the kind of most sought after speakers and CISO experts, has participated in the past at Chrysalis, and brings a great CISO and kind of security perspective to the table. So, the session focuses on how AI impacts the current future state of IAM, security, governance. We've talked about this at some level in every session thus far. And it's kind of infused its way into, just common culture, as I think Gary Zimmerman said in the early report he did on generative AI for us. Artificial intelligence over the years has seeked to, based on a big data set, has seeked to try to figure out what's going to happen next. Generative AI tries to do that, but then actually, based on that, produces things. And that's changed the whole dynamic. And there's this carrot, of course. If we can produce things at scale, from a marketing perspective, from an IT perspective, the ability to automatically generate, great code, and, from a customer operations perspective, to save, incredible amounts of money and have instant responses in finance and legal and HR and so forth, there's just a massive carrot. But and I think I took this from one of from one of your meetups, Barbara. But there's a stick. There's a lot of cautions. There's a lot of challenges. Andre Durand, who'll be with us on the Identity Legends panel in a while, had a presentation to kick off Identiverse, in which and I know Andre's a pretty dynamic guy, and he's usually walking around and doing things. He was kind of sitting down, presenting, and but the entire presentation was generative AI produced, and he really wasn't saying anything. And he basically showed how realistic it could look, and then played out a scenario where he had got his assistant with his voice to basically reset a password for him. And it was a very visual demonstration of what power it has on the bad side, but bias and discrimination and misinformation. And of course, as Barbara's trained me over the years, AI in general or machine learning is sometimes wrong. And so you can take this big data set and say this is what it is, but maybe 99% of the time it really is that, but sometimes it isn't. And if we're making decisions on that, that's a challenge. But of course, bad actors do things like intentionally manipulate that data and the results of the data and introduce the biases. And so lots and lots of challenges. Not to belabor this, because really you guys don't want to hear at least much more from me. We want to get the experts on here, talking about these areas. And I thought it might be good, Barbara, for you to just kind of give your take on kind of AI, where it is, some of the risks, some of the opportunities, kind of what generative AI is all about. And maybe for about 5-10 minutes, just give us kind of frame this discussion, because you're the pure play, AI expert.
Right. So, Gary, as you know, my background in AI is somewhat akin to your background in identity management, etc. Right? I've been in the field for like decades. Right? I weathered the winter of AI. I understand the different brands of AI, and I was very excited when ChatGPT came out, even though it's a form of AI I was never previously a fan of, which is the stochastic AI. So it cannot arrive at any conclusion with a certainty, which is problematic. And it won't always, at this point, even give you the same answer twice around. So I decided for fun, as a level set, what I was going to do, since Gary asked me. I input what Gary suggested. May I share my screen?
Yeah, so let me stop my share, and then I think you should be able to. Oh, it looks like we have Diana now. Outstanding. So yes, so now you should be able to click on share screen. Hopefully that there's a button on the bottom of, or maybe I need to, okay, multiple panel. Oh no, you got it. You got it. Perfect.
Can you see my,
Yes.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Right. So I input basically Gary's slides on the topic, and I built a little GPT using chat. And the reason I did this is manifold. It's like I said, I've been involved in AI, and large language models are by no means the only form of AI. And as we know, they're not reliable, right? They won't even generate the same answer twice. I can ask it. So I entered the names of the speakers, and I can show you I did the same thing with Bard. I mean, what else? Anybody else a little curious with the background in AI Ask. And it told me last time I got a very vanilla response. So yes, we know it's going to become more sophisticated. Of course, you have to take ethics into consideration. But I found it lacking. And like each time it generates a slightly different response, and I can actually pick up. There were times when it said, what specifically was I going to say in response to another panelist's questions? Because I entered all the panelists into the system. And I also did the same thing with Bard. I mean, I could have done it with many, but in many cases, it shows you the weaknesses and the limitations of the system. Because if the system is going to be A, it's not going to provide consistent output. And B, it has these so-called blind spots. So there was a DARPA presentation where they talk about, oh, it can't see. And I'm talking about large language models as a form of AI. Everyone thinks Gen AI and AI are the same things. But as a discipline, that has not been the case. And I believe Gary has written quite a bit about that. Have you not, Gary?
Yes.
The wave 1 and wave 2. So this is more the stochastic form. And I was involved also in some of the, earlier on, about a year ago, I was involved in some of the red teaming efforts on Discord to try and train chat with ethics, and I saw a lot of the issues going on. And in terms of utilizing it or adopting it, especially in terms of an industry, and yes, I absolutely believe ChatGPT is a revolution. I think it's fascinating. I'm addicted to it. It has incredible power for good. But we have to understand that it's like inventing a new tool, like fire. It also has great power for bad. So you have to know how to wield it. And what do? You fight fire with fire. So in terms of, say, dealing with adversarial attacks, which was involved in a lot of these red teaming efforts. I don't know if any of you are familiar with what red teaming means in terms of training large language models, but it's basically groups getting together, trying to break them, and then OpenAI would endorse this. And they would try and jailbreak the systems, but you can almost lull the thing into a false sense of security. And then you can slam in. The larger the context window and the larger you get into a dialogue with it, the more room there is for an adversarial attack or something completely unintended. And the unintended part is what scares me, quite frankly, the most. I'm not saying it shouldn't be used. I think it's an amazing tool. But I'm saying you need someone who can sort of look a little down the road and understand both its significance and impact. So I don't know if anybody can see my screen here.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought Bard was much more interesting in terms of its response. So it talked about AI-powered anomaly detection. That's a huge factor. Perfect for stochastic AI, identifying a suspicious user behavior via continuous monitoring and risk-based authentication, preventing breaches before they occur. That's a great use. And I've cited papers and resources, which I can supply to Gary, and he can provide you. Adaptive access control, and automated threat detection and response, right? So this is all the positives, right? Improving user experience. On the other hand, we want to look at the risks. So we're going to look at the positives. It increased customer experience, but it also introduces a new type of risk that has previously been unthought of. And that is the hardest thing to combat. And so that's why I think it needs to be used wisely. Yes, of course, you have to develop responsible AI practices, implement ethics guidelines. That's why I say they're slightly vanilla. And then I asked it for examples and papers because I never trust the results of an LLM. I always like to trust, but then verify. And that's possibly why some of the most powerful systems actually combine more than one just type of AI. So you trust it, and then you go to different sources and verify it. However, in terms of, for example, an attack on someone using an LLM within their enterprise, trying to counter some adversarial attack, those LLMs can be very, very creative. And that needs to be addressed. And so I saw that, I don't know how many of you are familiar with, you know, the guy who very first invented the deep learning net. Jan LeCun, I believe is his name, from Montreal, the professor. He's head of AI research at Meta, which is Facebook. And I think in the last week, he posted or reposted an ArchiveX article that the only way and the best way to combat these threats, and I kind of agree with it, is by using another LLM.
So you want to use an LLM to detect bad LLMs?
Yes. And I mean, so Jan LeCun is a big name. I could show you the paper, but yes, an LLM to detect bad LLMs and weird anomalous patterns and strange adversarial attacks to block them before they even get, you know, deep into the system, I think would be a great idea. It was literally published last week.
So I think this is a great
AI for good versus AI for bad. It's like a,
yeah. And Barbara locally also does an AI for good meetup that's had some really interesting discussions. So if you can relinquish control of the screen.
yeah, I could tell you what it said. Chat said all the other speakers would say that's more entertainment value. I can release this as an app on the store, or somehow you could make it available, Gary. But
Oh yeah, that would be great.
it's kind of funny. It kind of said what each panelist would say and how they would respond in kind.
Oh, wow, that's
really fun. I was playing with it for ages and sort of.
Wow, that's fascinating. Well,
Yeah.
So could you
pick up from your description and maybe from something on the web, the characteristics of each person involved, said what they would talk about and how they would respond to certain questions.
So
you could release that. I'll share it with you and release it however you want.
Well, yeah, please do. And it'll be interesting to see once we hear everyone say what they say, how good it was, how it predicted.
Right. And then how the personalities would interact, which was really, yeah, because, you know, this person has an AI background, this person has this background, and it literally, I mean, when I showed you the screen, right, it was popping up as default questions. What would this panelist say? What would that panelist say? And
you got your dog app up. All right, so if you can relinquish your screen, I'll go back to mine, and then we'll go around the virtual room and try to get everyone's perspective. But thank you so much for doing that level set. There's I know something about identity and security and kind of what's important to enterprises, but I don't think anyone has quite your background in AI, so that level set is of tremendous value. So let me again try.
I apologize if it's too high level, but
no,
it's just irresistible. I had to give that a shot.
No,
I mean, I think if you guys want to play with it, it's fun.
Okay, so are you guys seeing my screen again?
Yes.
Does it work? Okay, good. All right. So I started with Barbara. Chris, global head of AI at VMware. How does AI impact you, your roadmap, your customers? You know, what are your concerns and just experiences?
Yeah, I'll share a few things. I'll keep it brief so we can have a good discussion here. So I think many of you know VMware was the Broadcom acquisition of VMware closed last November, and so now really fully integrated into Broadcom as the largest software division. What's one thing I think is really unique about the way my org is constructed is our charter is advanced product and services development. We set and lead the AI strategy for the company, including policy, guardrails, et cetera. But what makes us different, I think, when I look at some of our peers is we have the same team. We run the internal AI services for the company. Most of the time, that's a separate function that the IT team is doing, right? It's not the product team doesn't actually operate the services as well. But we found that gives us a real strength in understanding what works, what doesn't work, where we should focus, and so forth. And just to hit on a couple of the points I think that Barbara made earlier, when we started looking at what are the priorities we have, like one of our initial use cases was code development. And we, like a lot of companies, looked at GitHub Copilot from Microsoft and Azure, and our legal team had like serious concerns with it. As a software company, our code is our intellectual property. It defines who we are as a business. So just any potential risk of code leakage, our code being used to train a model that might benefit a competitor, whatever it might be. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of safeguards out there, and I think Microsoft and OpenAI have done a good job. But that all said, it pointed us in a direction where we went towards open source, and we used the open source star coder model, which is fantastic. It's trained on more than 30 different languages. Initially, you're not going to find perfect results, but when we did a very light amount of tuning, and we went after the kernel development of our core hypervisor, just to tell you what use case. We didn't pick something like super simple, like we're going to just do this Golang thing. We're like, no, we're going to go after some more hardcore C. And what we found was more than 92% of our software engineers that use the tool found it successful, let them do their job faster. They weren't having to search Stack Overflow. They were just getting to results in a quicker period of time. That led us to really centering our strategy more around open source and privacy, where we wanted to make sure that privacy and control were at the center of a lot of the things that we were looking to do. And that's really driven our product strategy. So, we look at our software as really being needed to be deployed practically anywhere in the world. So we're very conscious about being able to decouple the AI from, say, like a particular SaaS dependency, and just maintaining some optionality there, and just a couple other things like Gary, you mentioned like accuracy, and I think, and Barbara mentioned this too. It's not just AI is wrong, but generative AI is confidently wrong, right? It just speaks with such certainty, like, oh yeah, of course, right? But you have to look into this, and for us, we have an internal search that looks at all of our documentation, KB articles, even private KB articles. And what we're using retrieval augmented generation. So when you get an answer back, you're not just getting what the model has created for you, but you're also getting sources. Like here's 6 different sources that I pulled to derive this answer. So you can do the verification. And one other point, I agree with Barbara on the use of AI to combat AI and to be able to verify AI. And where we're really focused in terms of pushing the industry is, how do you get there? It's not just to say I need an LLM, but I need an LLM that's fully open to inspection, right? That I can really understand not just the model being open, but also the data being used to train the model being available to scrutiny. Then I can get to, I would say, more positive results. These are some of the things we're looking at. I mean, I can talk a lot more, but I want to be mindful of time. And I know we got a lot of bright people on the panel.
No, that's fascinating. I actually built an AI content detector and all kinds of interesting things. But it's just amazing what can be done. But
yeah.
So Diana, as somebody who has a great history in the security space, and you're now focusing on AI, and I know you've worked with lots and lots of enterprises over your tenure. How should organizations be preparing for AI? What are your thoughts, your direction?
Yeah, I think one of the fascinating things is that AI has been in use for years and years. I was hearing somebody talk about AI recipe generation, like it been invented with the last year's Gen AI. And I worked at IBM Security when Chef Watson was around, which I think was 2014. I think we're going back a decade to Chef Watson, the chef. So most importantly, I think organizations need to take stock and understand how much AI and ML they actually already have within their organizations. The chances are, if you are a large financial services firm, if you're a government, a larger government, i.e. not a local town government, but a larger government, federal, you're using a lot of ML already. You may have thousands of models. So looking at AI and ML, not as something new that we're just adopting, but as a core part of what we've been using and driving our organizations and businesses with for years and years, whether it's unsupervised machine learning for a recommendation of what you should buy next or what you should watch next, depending on your streaming service, or if it's a robo-advisor in financial services that's perhaps managing your 401k. So let's take a look at it. Let's make sure that we're weaving security in. And I think the best way to do that is coming from, some of the ideas that are coming out of different thought leaders in the space. But I really like the way that CISA spoke about it, which is that AI and ML, most of the machine learning models are new assets, software assets within our organizations that we need to secure. And how do we secure things? We know how to secure things. My friend Malcolm has been doing it as long as I have. We know how to secure this, right, Malcolm? We build security in with layered security, and we create security by design. And in ML and AI, I think that's going to look something akin to where we were with DevSec, with DevOps. We have DevOps, great, Dev and Ops are working and everything's running more smoothly, but we forgot security. Now we need to put security in. We have DevSecOps. Same way, we need to take a look at ML SecOps. Look at what's going on in the ML operations, what's now additive or new with this vast, rapid adoption of Gen AI. Because when I talk about the existence of ML, I don't want to not imply that we have seen a big change with Gen AI and just a rapid adoption, because now people can interact with it themselves. So looking at the ML lifecycle, looking at how that shifted and changed and what the regulatory changes are internationally as we look at generative AI and the LLMs, and then create a security program that brings all of that into the fold. On the dev side, we've got ML SecOps, on Gen AI adoption. This is just making sure that it comes into the same kind of security that we have for any other vendor that we're adopting. And then one final thing before passing along is I would like to really highlight the supply chain of machine learning and the security of that, because in addition to these new assets, these models, new things we have to think about securing the data, the training data, how it's cleaned, if anyone's tampered with it, if it's been poisoned. We also have to look at the underlying solutions that are running our machine learning life cycles, because those two can be vulnerable to attack. And some of them are vulnerable to good old, standard attacks like poor authentication. So bringing that all together, we're going to have a much stronger life cycle overall.
Thank you, Diana. Malcolm, you've obviously, as Diana said, been trying to figure out how to mitigate risk for a long time and develop programs and processes to do that. How do you, I guess two parts, for your recommendations for large organizations, how aggressive should folks be, but what are some of those guardrails, and how do you, kind of envision mitigating, risk as folks move forward in these areas?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. And Diana's right. And, again, AI has been around for a long time. So I'll give you some dated history. When I was Chief Information Security Officer at Intel and also ran the Enterprise Apps Organization circa 2007, so 17 years ago, guess what was underneath that? A nascent data science team. You know what that data science team was doing? They were building, big data and analytics because we wanted to predict employee-related items for a great place to work. We were doing it, and Intel's got papers out still to this day on using that data science to help improve yield in factory operations. And guess what I did? I'll tie this to identity and access management. We had an issue, an individual called Pawnee who stole a few $100 million of intellectual property from Intel when they went and took a job at AMD. Now, AMD wasn't complicit in this, but guess what? We luckily found them. But it was because the manager spotted an email and then said, hey, this is unusual, and sent it on. I looked at it and said, this was a complete failure on our part. The signals intelligence was there. And so we started building what is now, grown into end user behavioral analytics. Again, predictive analytics to spot an insider, and then to use that to spot APTs, right? So it's been around for a long time. You have to, as Diane said, have the right security development lifecycle, privacy by design, all that stuff. We know how to do it. But another part in my evolution, I went to Silence after Intel, arguably probably the first cybersecurity company to actually be built around artificial intelligence and machine learning to mitigate malicious code. So I had to build all the security development lifecycle, privacy by design, look at all that infrastructure, not only for the enterprise, but what our product was doing. Now, some people know this, some people don't, but it's public information. It's published in the MITRE Atlas framework, which is the attack framework for AI, similar to the MITRE attack framework we're all familiar with. If you haven't seen Atlas, go check it out. They have a case study based upon a blog published, Silence, I Kill You, in 2019, 6 months after the BlackBerry attack. It was probably one of the first known inference attacks that basically rendered the entire capability to prevent malicious code execution useless. That took those researchers weeks, 40+ days, and several people. Today, you've got automated attack tooling capability towards machine learning that could do that same attack in 40 seconds or less.
And there are groups on the web that just do it for a hobby.
Yeah, and you get it for free, just like a lot of other attack tools.
Yeah.
So what I learned across this is anybody who sticks their hand in the sand and tries to ignore technology, whether it be decades ago, transition from mainframe to client server, to laptops, to phones, to virtualization, to cloud, you're going to lose at the end of the day. And if you constrain your company from the progression of technology, you're creating a systemic business risk, one that you'll likely go out of business with, because those who appropriately adopt, and I'll say assertively deploy, not aggressively deploy, because I think when you're aggressive, you're going to start to risk others. If you're assertive, you're going to be forward leaning, but you're going to be aware of the risk issues. But I'll tell you from my Silence experience, though, we did everything that you could think of in the traditional control sense. We even went beyond traditional controls to do unique things, to test the products, code of conducts for our data scientists. We wanted to protect our product to the greatest extent possible. I can tell you, because of the Silence attack, traditional controls will not work. Your Silences, your SentinelOnes, your CrowdStrikes, they are not going to go inspect the inside of a machine learning capability to see if malicious code is embedded in that. And I can tell you today, malicious code is embedded in some models. They're not going to tell you if the data has been poisoned because they don't look at it. So the infrastructure and the tooling for AI and ML is so fundamentally different than many of the other technologies that we've seen to date. You have to develop a new capability for the appropriate security development lifecycle to check and see if the data has been poisoned before you use the model, to check and see if there's other code related issues. So you've got to do it, but you got to do it differently.
But don't you think in a way having poisoned data is useful, because then it can be used to deter other attacks?
I
Because
think
people understand the nature of those malevolent attacks.
poison data.
That's how you prime or prompt the information out of the LLM.
In some contexts, Barbara, I totally agree with you. But if I'm going to an open source capability like Hugging Face or any of these other ones and downloading a model and just running with it, not knowing if the data has been poisoned,
Oh, yeah,
I'm
yeah. I
causing
fully agree.
a risk issue for my organization and the users of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
That and the fact you could do all that upfront security development lifecycle. You could do the safe, trustworthy, ethical stuff.
Knowing that information to detect external attacks is
Yeah, but you have to do, so we are all familiar with EDR, right? Endpoint detection and response. Well, you need the equivalent of AI or MLDR. You need a wrapper around the models for real-time runtime protection.
you don't want to do so.
Take the same concepts we're used to, SDLC and real-time runtime protection, but you have to find the tooling and adjust your business processes to do that in this new setting and new infrastructure. Because if you don't, you will be creating substantial risks.
Yeah, and supporting Malcolm's point there about, these models tend to run with very high privilege and no one is scanning them, or it's very rare to have them scanned before they're downloaded. And I just want to underscore what Malcolm said about many of these models have malicious code. They may have dropper malware. We scan the models in Hugging Face regularly. That's one of the things we do with our tool. And we can show you,
there's thousands of them.
Right.
You and I can both
We
back
can
it up.
both, yeah.
Both of our organizations are doing that. There's thousands.
We're not making this up. Yeah.
Yeah, that already have data poisoning or malicious code embedded in them.
Yep. And then they run with these high privs and lack of protection, and it's just a recipe for.
Well, and to your point, Diana, the other thing is the new tooling that you mentioned, the ML ops tools, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, again, no different than other tools. Well, guess what? If an attacker finds a 0-day in an ML ops tool, guess what that does to your entire ML ops pipeline? Guess what that does to your data model? Guess what that does to your intellectual property?
Yep.
If you own the ML ops tool, I own the model, I own the data, I own the inputs and outputs of it. And there are 0-day vulnerabilities and more being found every day in those ML op platforms that people are using.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a whole platform, Hunter, HUNTR, which is a bug bounty platform specifically around the ML ops tools. And you can go there and just see how many.
Familiar with it.
Gary, back to your original question, we have to be assertive in the use of AI to drive business value. But where we need to be aggressive is on properly securing it and making sure that we have the privacy aspects of it done right. Because if we lag in that, like we've historically done in every other technology transition, the systemic risks, not only for our business, but society, are going to be well greater than anything we've ever seen.
Yeah.
I think the point you raised on elevated privilege is really important because you're seeing your models are now new backdoors that you weren't planning for in the past, because now if the user has access to a model that has been trained on data that they should not have access to, right, it opens up all sorts of problems. And the practical approach, I've seen with organizations I've worked with is they're effectively running multiple instances of the same model based on different access rights within the organization. Even in the Department of Defense, depending on the security clearance, there's going to be redundant versions of a model based on clearance level, because there's too many questions right now in terms of how do I control access and how do I control the output of the model, relative to the data it's trained on. And people are taking a very conservative approach with how to deal with that today.
Yeah, because the output of that model, when you think of DoD applications and so forth, may unbeholden to the requester of that data, create insights that should be secured.
And yet the question remains how to predict the unpredictable.
But that's always been the challenge for security. It's predictable that we're going to get hacked in some way.
It's just
might not be predictable in terms of how, but that's the nature of risk, and that's why our job is to understand it and then try to the best extent possible control for it.
But in general, generative AI doesn't even have a confidence factor in terms of it comes up with an answer. I mean, I've literally heard there's functions in it. possibly the most powerful thing. It doesn't know the answer, and it comes up with a causal routine called generate most plausible answer.
Well, to your point, we have to have some false positive, false negative. How do you
So it knows when it's lying. An LLM knows when it's lying.
When it's lying intentionally or not.
Yeah.
When it's hallucinating or
When it's hallucinating, when it doesn't have the answer, because like literally like some of them, I mean, so I was part of whatever, but I mean, literally it calls a routine saying it doesn't have the answer, it doesn't have the data, and it calls this routine called generate most plausible answer. And that's why it comes up with this arrogant sounding, I know everything kind of attitude.
Sounds like many of our
statistically
politicians.
probable answers.
Yeah, which is like some
Yeah.
humans, right?
It sounds like the typical consultant.
Yes.
Whether you fully know it or not.
There's literally
You're
like
sure of it.
whatever you want to call it, depending on the language you're writing it. It's called generate most plausible answer. Because it knows it doesn't know the answer. It wasn't trained on it. So it knows it's falling off a cliff. Oh, help me. Generate most plausible answer. I guess that's what a human would do.
It is. Well, but that's it. It's sort of like Mad Libs. It's sort of this fill in the blank thing, which I think when people use generative AI, they think that they're talking to the smartest thing in the world that's always going to be accurate, that I think people assume does know what's right and what's wrong. Like you think about the LLMs that were generating court cases that had never existed. They were really good court cases. They would have fit the brief perfectly, but the AI didn't know if they were real or not, so it did what it was supposed
but the
to do.
obvious
It
answer
generated
to that one
something
is to
predictable.
go into one of those case law directories and check to see whether it exists or not.
Well,
So
with
that's
RAG, right?
terrible.
With RAG, with retrieval augmented, you can just focus it on sources. But I would question if the AI actually understands if it's right or wrong. It's generating something that's statistically probable. So that's why the training is so important. The data is so important.
Oh, it's critical, right? It depends on the.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a crazy, I mean, there are many crazy analogies, but I took astronomy and a professor of mine once said to me, why is sculpture a more meaningful form of art than painting? And his comment was because aliens visiting from another planet are going to have their eyes trained to see colors in a different frequency. So they're going to be able to see the sculpture.
Yeah.
But they won't be able to see the paintings. So universally, sculpture is much more, and I mean, literally universally, it's a much more meaningful form of art because they can see the shape. And that's kind of how Gen AI works. It only knows what it knows. And after that, it's
but you could argue your professor introduced a bias. He made an assumption on somebody's ability to see colors versus shapes. So he introduced a bias in his answer.
But there's going to be a bias in everything, you have to admit. How do you develop something that is unbiased?
That's the challenge.
Who defines the bias? What is or is not biased?
And what may be in some cases an appropriate intentional bias, right?
Right.
Versus an inappropriate bias.
Right? Yeah.
So I think we've touched on a lot of these things already, but in the remaining 6 minutes, anyone who wants to address any of the additional discussion topics,
Gary, why don't I start? Because a lot of times people will go, well, okay, we've got chatter around it. It might be in use. It might not be in use. We're talking about LLMs. What do I do? How do I do it? I think the first thing is to step back, in essence, take an inventory. Again, Diana mentioned, we're traditional controls. Where is it? How's it being used? Who's using it? Figure that out first. Then look and figure out if I have this view, former finance person, right? Return on investment. If an organization is defining benefit from the use of AI, then if the AI is compromised or subverted in some way, that'll create a consequential risk. So if I'm promoting material benefit, consequently, if it's not properly protected up front in the security development lifecycle or in the real-time runtime aspect of it, it's going to cause a material risk. Do those three things and then start figuring out where your traditional controls will not provide adequate control for the risks. And I'll tell you right now from my prior experience, most of those controls will not provide adequate risk reduction and risk management for you.
I think you can even step back from that, or maybe this is a precursor. Is one of the things we did that we actually, as we learned, we just assumed everybody was doing it, and then we learned it wasn't the case. Last year, we formed an AI council, and it was our CISO, it was legal, it was marketing, it was product teams. And it was really important for us to have usage guidelines for AI so that it was guiding just technology decisions that were being made early. Because before that, what I was doing was basically every day I would get like 12 requests around GPT usage in a product, and I would just say no. So this at least helped me to scale a little bit. But things like you hate to have like a panel like this and somebody says, oh, you need governance. It's like, well, no kidding, of course you need governance. But it's one of the things that sometimes you just take for granted, and that it's just the lack of even building an internal policy just isn't there, right? Like we started following the NIST standards early as well, and now this is something that we're working in the federal government, right? There's legislation now to mandate this for generative AI, but we think getting out in front of these things and getting companies aligned, it actually just helps alleviate even potential for technical debt and some poor decisions that you might make.
Yes, but do you think even the legislative government has the right experts involved?
No.
They can host decisions. No, neither do I.
No, but I think the intention is in the I think the intention is in the right place. I think the guidance is there's always room for improvement, but I think we have to have some degree here of regulation at the end of the day, because of the ability, as we've all talked about here, for generative AI to put out wrong information that can cause a lot of damage in a lot of industries. So there has to be some types of standards around common safeguards. It doesn't have to be the federal government that creates it, but I think the need is absolutely important.
Not just wrong information, but inconsistent information. Sam Altman said in some interview yesterday, something to the effect that I should pull up the article, maybe it was the day before. Chat can generate up to 10,000 answers for any specific question. So if you repeatedly ask the same question, you won't get the same answer. I mean, whoever in their lifetime thought if you're used to coding, you'd call an API and get a different result each time.
Yeah.
Right. Well, because it's changing, right? The models are drifting, they're decaying over time. And
they're decaying, and they're also probabilistic in nature.
Exactly. And
all the laws are getting thrown at by Congress, and who knows what's going on if you're using GPT.
There was have you guys seen the poem attack?
Which one?
Poem. Someone, the prompt to the LLM was just repeat the word poem indefinitely. And the LLM sort of, I'm editorializing with got bored, but at some point something happened within the model. And instead of just reporting out poem, it was giving out sensitive data like phone numbers, for example, which is really interesting action coming back from the model.
So any parting thoughts that anyone has, things that we didn't touch on that you'd like to leave folks with?
I'd add to a point Diana made, the supply chain aspects of this. Again, if you're saying you're not doing much of it, you don't have a data science team and all that stuff, great. I can guarantee you're already using AI. You're buying it from security vendors. You're getting it from identity and access management vendors. You're getting it from other players. Make sure in your third-party risk, you ask specifically about their security development lifecycle, as well as how they're doing real-time runtime protection to protect the AI that they're providing to you baked into the solutions that you're getting.
That's great advice.
And I can also tell you, living in AI, there was a decade where AI was an ugly word on your resume. You couldn't get a job.
Well, I mean, having
Yeah.
been, like I said, at Silence,
Now, like there's zillions of AI experts. With all
did
Such a good
anybody
point.
in the thousands of third-party risk assessments that I got as Chief Security and Trust Officer at Silence, did any one of those things ask me about how I was securing AI? No.
Yeah,
None.
right.
It's a very valid point.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's
I mean, that's it.
That's a
Maybe-
huge lesson learned from this alone. You know, to basically look for specific capabilities towards securing AI, not just the general
Yeah,
stuff.
to Chris's point, ask them how they're following the NIST standards. There's actually a NIST workshop tomorrow that I'm participating in around follow up on the executive order. And then beyond just are they following those standards, all of those standards, and it doesn't matter if it's FedRAMP, CMMC, all that stuff, SOC 2, none of them are appropriately dealing with AI. And when they are, they're only dealing with the upfront SDLC side. None of them are focused on real-time runtime protection on it.
Yeah,
Well, Austin said his philosophy was write the code and let it break. That's completely the opposite paradigm to what we're talking about right now.
Yep.
You don't
Yep.
just write it and let it break. It's fun, yes.
yeah,
I'd
the
also say
impact
that
is too
funny.
high.
I-
But
Support Malcolm, be assertive
a lot of
in
risk.
terms of your contract negotiations, because with the different ISV contracts that we made for our internal services, the data leakage and the indemnifications was just incredibly weak. There's some contracts it took us like six weeks plus just to get through the legal process, because there's just so much unknowns out there. There's not like really good standards for, you know, in terms of corporate legal departments. So that was also something else that we had run into, kind of naively walked into, I guess, a little bit with some of the vendors we were working with. And some of them had been around for years. So we thought they would have some pretty like structured language in terms of safeguards for our own proprietary data, and they did not. And that was a real sticking point.
What made you go with the model choice you did? Because data leakage is clearly a huge issue. I mean, I know my one son works for Sega, and they would not allow anyone to touch it because of data leakage issues for months.
It's one of the main reasons that drove us to first, like, going with StarCoder. We're using Llama 2 internally, Wizard LM. You know, there's also, we're also using, where we're not as worried about data was with our like marketing department. We use a couple different SaaS services for content creation, which is, we're like, fine, who cares, whatever, it's all just public anyway.
Yeah.
But for anything more sensitive, sales contracts, source code, legal, that's where we've been far more particular about wanting to operate our own services, just because we feel more comfortable from a risk mitigation perspective having complete control of the stack end to end than leaving
guys,
some of that
guys, I hate to
You've
jump
had
in.
good experiences with Llama too.
We're getting the hook.
Okay.
Thank you so much. This was
Thank you
fantastic.
so much.
And we're moving over to the security legend, or to the identity legends panel next. So thanks, I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Here's
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Nice virtually meeting you.